They were just two 10-year-old girls boarding a plane with first-class tickets and smiles full of excitement. But the moment Ava and Noelle Grant stepped into that luxury cabin, the air changed. Eyes narrowed. Whispers rose. A flight attendant blocked their path, asking questions no child should ever have to answer. "Are you sure these are your seats?" she sneered. What began as a simple flight turned into a public trial, judged by strangers, condemned without cause. But what no one knew was that a silent storm was brewing in Seat 1A, and when it rose, everything would change. Ava clutched her small pink backpack with both hands, her fingers pressing into the soft fabric as if it could ground her. Beside her, Noelle adjusted the ribbon on her braid, glancing at the boarding pass on her phone again, just to be sure. Gate 4A, seats 1B and 1C. First class. Just like their dad said. They stood at the edge of the boarding ramp, watching the sleek Falcon Airlines jet gleam under the terminal lights. It was their first time flying without a parent, but Alexander Grant had left nothing to chance. From VIP check-in to a printed letter authorizing unaccompanied travel, every detail had been managed with precision. Until now. "Excuse me, sweethearts," a voice chimed behind them. Ava turned to see a tall flight attendant with perfect makeup and a tight smile. Her name tag read Emily. "I think there's been a little mix-up," Emily said, her eyes moving from the girls' faces to their clothes. Coordinated cardigans and clean white sneakers. "First class is for premium ticket holders only." Noelle blinked. "We are premium ticket holders," she said, holding up her phone. "These are our seats, 1B and 1C. Emily's smile didn't fade, but it tightened. "I see that, sweetheart. But sometimes systems glitch. Are you sure someone didn't print those by accident? These seats are quite expensive." Ava's throat tightened. "Our dad booked them," she said quietly, reaching into her backpack to retrieve the notarized letter he gave them. Emily didn't even look at it. "Maybe Coach is more comfortable for young travelers anyway. Wouldn't you prefer to be with kids your own age?" Ava and Noelle exchanged a look. They were 10, not toddlers. They'd practiced the boarding process for days. Noelle took a breath. "We were told to sit in first class. We're supposed to be here." A voice buzzed from the gate behind them. The agent looked up, confused. "What's the holdup?" Emily turned. "We're just sorting out a mistake." Ava's stomach sank. Passengers behind them were watching now. A woman in a business suit shook her head. A man whispered to his wife. The murmurs grew, louder than they should have. Ava tried to step forward. "Our seats are just there." Emily held out a hand. "I'm going to need to verify this with a supervisor before I can let you on board." And just like that, the walkway into first class, into safety, comfort, and legitimacy, was cut off. Behind them, the line of passengers swelled. Behind that smile, Ava could see something cold. And somewhere in seat 1A, a man closed his laptop, but said nothing. Noelle held her phone higher, screen aglow with the Falcon Airlines confirmation email. "It's right here," she said, voice cracking just slightly. "We checked in online. Our names are Ava and Noelle Grant, seats 1B and 1C, first class." Emily's hand didn't move from the barrier she'd made with her body. "I understand," she said, tone now louder, enough to catch attention. "But these girls might be part of our sponsorship program. You know, the unaccompanied minors placed on flights through youth services." Ava's eyes widened. "We're not in any program," she said, clutching the envelope her father gave them. "Our dad booked this flight himself." Emily turned toward the slowly forming crowd, as if looking for backup. "Sometimes they don't understand the booking process. It happens. Let's just seat them somewhere more appropriate while we sort this out." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ava felt it. So did Noelle. More appropriate meant not here. From behind, a voice piped up. "Excuse me." A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and an expensive tote stepped forward. She wore a navy power suit, pearls around her neck, and a badge on her bag that read Global Children's Alliance. Finally, Ava thought. Someone's going to help. I don't want to interfere, the woman said, looking down at the twins, then up at Emily. But maybe let's not escalate this. Let the crew handle it quietly. We don't want to cause a scene. Emily nodded, clearly relieved. Thank you, ma'am. Noelle's mouth opened slightly. We're not causing a scene, she whispered. The woman's smile was thin. Of course not, dear. You're being very well behaved. Ava noticed her eyes never really met theirs. They slid over them, assessing, measuring, dismissing. A whisper from behind. Aren't those girls from that viral video last year? Another. No, different kids. Same look, though. Noelle shrank back. Ava stood straighter. Emily turned to the gate agent. I'm requesting a seat reassignment pending verification. Put them on standby for row 18. The agent hesitated. But their tickets? Just do it, Emily snapped. The woman in pearls smiled again, patting Ava's shoulder. It's better this way, sweetheart. Ava stared at her. There was no warmth in that hand, just policy. She didn't know yet that this woman, the one who had just de-escalated, had once been exposed in a news article for redirecting donations from a children's shelter to fund luxury staff retreats. Global Children's Alliance was her armor and her cover. Seat 1A remained silent, but Alexander Grant's knuckles had gone white around his phone. The boarding ramp finally opened, and Ava and Noelle were silently ushered down the narrow aisle. Their heads were low, their hands still clutching their passes and the crumpled authorization letter. Emily walked ahead of them, her posture firm, rehearsed. At the front cabin, she made a sharp gesture toward 2 seats in row 18, far from first class, far from anyone who might ask questions. But before they could sit, a voice chimed in from across the aisle. Hey, don't worry, it's not your fault. The man had a weathered ball cap, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead, and a smug smile that didn't match his tone. He looked like someone's retired uncle, casual, comfortable, forgettable. He gestured at the open seat beside him. I've seen worse. Honestly, it's kind of funny. Ava looked at him cautiously. What do you mean? He winked. Nothing. Just, sometimes these things blow up more than they need to. He tapped at his phone, thumb flicking quickly. The camera app was open. Noelle noticed it first, the little red light blinking. The man wasn't recording his own seat or the flight info screen. His phone was aimed directly at them. You're filming us, Noelle said, barely above a whisper. He didn't look up. Relax, kid. It's just for a group I'm part of. We share funny moments, airport drama, that kind of stuff. Ava's eyes narrowed. Funny? The man chuckled. Don't worry, your faces aren't even the point. It's just about the situation. People love this stuff. He scrolled quickly to a page labeled First Class Follies. Hundreds of thumbnails, grainy videos of passengers arguing, crying, being escorted off planes. Captions like, entitled teen gets wrecked by crew, and nice try, buddy. You're not fancy enough. Ava saw a comment scroll past. These kids again? Every week there's a new set. Her stomach turned. You shouldn't be filming us, Noelle said, louder now. This isn't a joke. The man just shrugged. Tell that to the internet. Around them, passengers pretended to look away, but their body language betrayed them. Stiff shoulders, half-turned heads, phones angled just enough. Emily passed by, offering snacks. Her gaze flicked toward the man, but she said nothing. Noelle realized why. She'd seen the phone too. She just didn't care. At the front of the plane, Alexander Grant shifted slightly in seat 1A. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but now his phone screen glowed. A silent video feed capturing everything from his watch's embedded lens. The man with the ball cap didn't know he was being filmed too, and this footage wasn't going to a meme page. Alexander Grant hadn't spoken a word. Seat 1A was a vantage point, a throne without a crown. While the chaos unfolded behind him, he sat perfectly still, fingers tapping slow, deliberate patterns on the leather armrest. The twins were now settled uncomfortably in row 18. He had watched it all. The confrontation, the shaming, the quiet dismissal. But still, he said nothing. To the crew, he was just another polished businessman. Gray at the temples. Navy blazer. No entourage. No signal of significance. But in his ear, a near-invisible earpiece crackled to life. Protocol 6 activated. Observation phase complete. Proceeding to escalation. Across the aisle in seat 1D, a passenger stirred. He looked like a mild-mannered retiree. Balding, soft denim shirt, reading a mystery novel. Nothing about him drew attention, except the way his eyes tracked everything too precisely. He leaned slightly into the aisle, catching Emily's eye mid-service. A subtle nod, barely perceptible. Emily's posture straightened, but she didn't blink. She pivoted down the aisle, stopping near the man with the ball cap, the one who had recorded the girls. "You're not allowed to film other passengers without consent," she said, voice crisp. The man looked up, startled. "What? But I thought—" "I'm asking you to delete the footage," she continued. "Now." His fingers fumbled with his phone. "I wasn't doing anything wrong." Behind her, the man in 1D quietly turned a page in his book. Ava and Noel watched from their seats, confused. Moments ago, Emily had ignored the man's filming. Now, she was reprimanding him? Noel leaned toward her sister. "Why did she change?" "I don't know," Ava whispered. Another passenger, an older woman in pearls, turned toward the aisle. "Is everything all right?" she asked sweetly, her eyes darting to Ava and Noel. "They're not causing trouble, are they?" Before Emily could answer, the man in 1D closed his book, slowly, deliberately, then stood. "Thank you, Emily," he said, voice calm. "We'll review the footage and notes after landing. Continue as planned." She nodded. "Understood." The man turned toward Alexander, gave a single, imperceptible glance, and walked toward the restroom. Ava's chest tightened. "That guy, he's not just a passenger." "He knew her name," Noel said. And that's when it hit them. This wasn't just random cruelty. It was a test. A sick, calculated test. But who was being tested? The staff? The passengers? Or them? Back in seat 1A, Alexander whispered just one phrase into his earpiece. "Escalation phase. Begin." The soft hum of the jet engines filled the cabin as the plane pushed back from the gate. Ava and Noel sat rigid in their seats, eyes forward, hands clenched tightly in their laps. From the outside, they looked calm. Inside, every nerve vibrated with confusion, humiliation, and a growing sense of betrayal. Back in seat 1A, Alexander Grant adjusted the cuff of his blazer, the gold edge of his smartwatch catching the overhead light. His face betrayed nothing, but under the surface, gears were turning. He pulled out his phone, a sleek black device with no visible logos, and tapped into an encrypted app known only to Falcon Airlines' highest executive partners. Recipient: Ethics Oversight Division message. Protocol 6, real-time breach confirmed. Initiate Section 4, Internal Conduct Review. Authorization code AG77492. He hit send. The reply came within seconds. Confirmed. Code verified. Escalation to Executive Integrity Team initiated. Expect intervention within 30 minutes. Do not engage directly. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't about saving his daughters. Not yet. This was about the rot. For years, Alexander had fought to keep Falcon Airlines from sliding into the same moral decay he'd seen consume other companies. He'd argued for accountability, transparency, and when the board refused to act, he wrote in a clause. Quietly, legally, permanently. Section 4. A mechanism built for moments like this. It allowed any partner controlling more than 20% of Falcon's supply chain to trigger an unscheduled ethics review, bypassing PR departments and forcing real-time oversight. Most executives never used it. Until now. Back in row 18, Noelle reached into her backpack and pulled out the envelope again. the one with their father's signature, notarized and embossed with his company seal. "He gave us everything," she whispered. "And they still don't believe us." Ava looked down at the paper, then toward the front of the plane. "He knows." "How do you know?" "Because Dad doesn't do silence unless he's building something." 3 rows behind them, a young man in business casual glanced at his phone and stiffened. He was Falcon's onboard liaison, planted to monitor flight service quality. He'd just received an emergency ping. "Ethics review, code red. Do not interfere. Document and observe." He looked toward seat 1A. Alexander didn't look back. Instead, he stared out the window at the fading lights of the runway, the reflection of his own face in the glass, composed, patient, deadly. It took less than 15 minutes. The man in the ball cap, smug and satisfied, had uploaded his shaky footage to First Class Follies, tagging it with, "Entitled kids think first class is daycare. Wait for the flight attendant's face, LOL." But the internet didn't laugh. It roared. Within 5 minutes, the post had over 300 comments. By 10 minutes, it was trending on the subreddit "Ari Here Public Freakout," but not for the reasons he expected. Wait, these girls are 10? They're literally sitting there doing nothing. How is this funny? Why's the flight crew targeting children? This guy's the real clown. And then it got worse, for him. One sharp-eyed viewer reverse image searched the man's avatar. Within minutes, his LinkedIn surfaced. His name, Mark Renshaw. Former regional manager for a luxury hospitality chain, one that had just rolled out a zero tolerance for discrimination initiative. The screenshots were brutal. Tag after tag. At Orion Resorts. "This your guy?" At Orion HR. "Still proud of your brand ambassador?" The company responded fast. "This behavior does not reflect our values. We are investigating immediately." By the time Falcon Flight 227 hit cruising altitude, Mark's video had been removed. His account deactivated. But it didn't stop there. Copies had already circulated. And now, instead of mocking Ava and Noel, the video was weaponized against the flight crew. Someone stitched the clip with a freeze frame of Emily blocking the girls. Caption: "You don't belong here unless you're white." It hit TikTok like wildfire. Noel didn't know any of this yet. She was still curled into her seat, watching clouds blur past the window. Ava had her hands folded, jaw set, trying not to cry. But deep in the network of Falcon Airlines' crisis management firm, red alerts were blinking. On a screen in a Manhattan office, a young analyst turned to her supervisor. "This is going viral," she said. "Not in the way we planned." The supervisor leaned closer. The twins were now front and center, framed not as troublemakers, but as victims of corporate bias and public humiliation. The audience wasn't just watching, it was choosing sides, and it wasn't siding with Falcon. Back on the plane, the young Falcon liaison stared at his phone, panic spreading across his face. He glanced toward seat 1A again. Alexander still didn't move, but his message had been received. And now, the fall had begun. Not from the sky, but from power, perception, and control. The moment came without fanfare. No announcement, no raised voice, no thunderous confrontation, just movement. Alexander Grant closed the slim leather folder on his lap and slowly stood from seat 1A. His frame was tall, commanding, yet unassuming. He straightened his blazer with one hand and stepped quietly into the aisle. The suddenness of it made passengers glance up. First class was mid-service, but forks froze mid-air. The quiet clink of cutlery stopped. Even the flight attendants paused, sensing a shift. He walked slowly toward the galley. Emily turned, surprised to see a passenger approaching during service. Her brow furrowed until her eyes met his, and for a fleeting second, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, or unease. "Excuse me," Alexander said, voice calm, rich, deliberate. "Are you the lead cabin attendant on this flight?" She straightened. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. "I'd like to have a word. Privately." Emily blinked. "Of course. About what, sir?" He gave a faint smile, the kind that was polite but held a sharpened edge. "About your decision-making process and your understanding of Falcon Airlines' code of conduct." Her face drained of color. Daniel Mercer, who had just emerged from the rear to stretch his legs, caught sight of the exchange and stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" Alexander turned slightly, locking eyes with him. "Ah, Mr. Mercer. Good. You should join us." The tone was perfectly neutral, not accusatory, not hostile. But something about it made Mercer stop in his tracks. The nearby passengers leaned in, their eyes flicking between the three of them. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Alexander gestured gently toward the front galley curtain. "Just a moment of your time." Emily hesitated. "We're mid-service." "You won't be," he said quietly, "for much longer." That line, quiet, nearly whispered, echoed louder than any shouting ever could. Daniel's jaw twitched. "Sir, unless this is an emergency." "It is," Alexander said, turning toward the curtain. "Just not the kind you're trained for." He held the flap open, waiting. Silently, Emily followed. Daniel followed a beat later. The curtain swished shut behind them, and first class exhaled. The silence was electric. Noelle watched from row 18, her back straight. Ava leaned into the aisle, straining to see. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling. For the first time since they boarded, passengers began to murmur again, but not with judgment, with fear, with anticipation. Because whatever was happening behind that curtain wasn't normal, and somehow, everyone knew the storm had finally stood up. Inside the front galley, the air had changed. Emily stood rigid beside the coffee cart. Daniel Mercer crossed his arms, trying to project authority, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Alexander remained composed, hands clasped behind his back, the quiet force of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to own the room. "Mr. Grant," Daniel said carefully, "if you have a concern, I suggest submitting it through the proper channels after landing. This is neither the time nor the place." Alexander raised one hand. "I'm not here to submit a complaint. I'm here to observe a system in collapse." Emily glanced sideways at Daniel, but he spoke louder now, trying to reassert control. "If you continue to disrupt operations, I'll be forced to call security." Alexander tilted his head, almost amused. "By all means." Daniel tapped his earpiece and muttered a few clipped words into the crew intercom. "Security to first class. Passenger disturbance." From the back of the plane, the word security traveled like static. Passengers sat up straighter. Someone whispered, "What now?" In row 18, Ava clutched Noelle's hand. Then, 2 minutes later, the cabin curtain swished open again. But the man who stepped through wasn't wearing a TSA badge. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, not a uniform. No tie, thin-rimmed glasses, a black leather folio tucked under one arm. Calm, unbothered. He flashed a badge, quick, efficient. "I'm with airport security," he said, his voice smooth. "Who issued the call?" "I did," Daniel said, stepping forward. "This passenger is interfering with crew authority." The man turned to Alexander. "Your name, sir?" "Alexander Grant." Something flickered behind the man's eyes. He opened his folio, pulled out a sheet of paper, and handed it to Emily. "Effective immediately," he said. "This flight is under observational review pursuant to Federal Regulation 49 CRD 227. You are advised to cease further crew interaction with the following passengers." Daniel blinked. I'm sorry, what?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not airport security," he said, voice lower now, aimed like a blade. "I'm a federal civil rights attorney, contracted by the Department of Transportation and Falcon's Independent Ethics Board. I'm here to document violations of federal anti-discrimination law in real time." He pointed at Alexander. "This man exercised Clause AE 77492. You know what that means." Emily's lips parted. "That clause is..."
Real.
Very, the lawyer replied. And binding. Daniel stumbled back a step. You can't just— I already did, the lawyer said. The entire galley fell silent. The passengers beyond the curtain sat frozen. The word federal had a weight that cut through every excuse, every justification. Ava and Noel watched the suited man walk past them toward the cockpit, clipboard in hand, face unreadable. Alexander didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He'd just flipped the table, and no one even saw it coming. Ava's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the TikTok app, holding the phone low, angled just enough to capture her and Noel in the frame. They'd kept quiet for so long, done everything right. Now it was time to be seen.
Hi,
she whispered. We're on Falcon Airlines Flight 227. We have first-class tickets, but they made us sit in the back. We're only 10. We didn't do anything wrong. Noel leaned in. Our dad bought the tickets. They said we were in the wrong place, but we weren't. Ava hit go live. Within a minute, the view count ticked from 0 to 800. At 5 minutes, 27,000. By the 10-minute mark, 103,000 viewers, and climbing. Comments exploding across the screen. They're 10? This is disgusting. Where's the crew? Tagging at Falcon Air now. Boycott them. In first class, a woman with short curls and a calm presence glanced over from seat 3A. She'd been silent the entire flight, quietly sipping chamomile tea, scrolling through emails. Until now. She turned to the man beside her and whispered something. Then, gently, she reached for her own phone and opened the live stream. The chat recognized her face almost immediately. Dr. Lenora Vance, best-selling author, professor at Georgetown Law, and once, long ago, a scholarship student under a man named Alexander Grant. She tapped request to join live. Ava blinked at the screen, then accepted. The chat went berserk. Lenora's face appeared beside theirs, calm but electric with purpose. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Vance. I'm on this flight. I'm watching this in real time. She angled her camera slightly to show the aisle, then whispered, The man in seat 1A is Alexander Grant, aerospace executive, federal ethics architect, and one of the most powerful figures in aviation compliance law. Thousands of comments flew by. Wait, what? This is the girl's dad? They messed with the wrong family, Lenora continued, her voice level. He's the man who designed Falcon's anti-discrimination clause. I should know. He mentored me. I studied under him at Columbia, and I can confirm he's here, watching, documenting, enforcing. In seat 1A, Alexander glanced briefly at her through the aisle gap. Their eyes met. He gave a slight nod. Lenora smiled and turned back to the screen. These girls aren't just passengers, they're witnesses. This is live justice, and trust me, consequences are coming. The viewer count surged past 150,000. The comments became a blur of support, outrage, and calls to action. Somewhere at Falcon Airlines headquarters, PR alarms were going off. But in the cabin, Noel smiled for the first time in hours. Not because things were fixed, but because they weren't alone anymore. By the time Flight 227 began its descent, the world outside the plane was already on fire. The live stream had reached over 300,000 viewers. Hashtags like #JusticeForTheGrant Twins and #FalconFail trended across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Cable news outlets interrupted programming with "Breaking Now" banners. The story had hit a nerve, not just because two little girls were humiliated, but because of who their father was. When the plane touched down at Reagan National Airport, reporters were already crowding the arrival gate. Cameras, boom mics, flash bulbs. But before any passenger could step off, a Falcon Airlines representative boarded and whispered something to the crew. 5 minutes later, a private corridor was opened. Ava, Noel, and Alexander were quietly escorted through it. No spotlight, no statement, just calm silence. The press wasn't as lucky. 30 minutes after landing, Falcon Airlines called a press conference. The room was tense. Lights, reporters, flashing cameras. At the center podium stood the CEO of Falcon Airlines, a man with perfect gray hair, expensive cufflinks, and the smile of someone used to owning every room he entered. Marshall Creighton. To the untrained eye, he was just another corporate executive. But those who'd followed the aerospace industry long enough knew Creighton was once a rival of Alexander Grant. Years ago, they had faced off in a landmark discrimination lawsuit over hiring practices at Orion Systems. Alexander had won. Barely. The court ruling had forced reforms industry-wide. The tension between them had never cooled. Falcon Airlines deeply regrets the incident aboard Flight 227, Creighton began, his voice smooth but carefully measured. We are conducting an internal review and have placed involved staff on temporary leave. A reporter's hand shot up. Mr. Creighton, were you aware that Alexander Grant, the man behind Falcon's own ethics clause, was on board? Creighton's lips tightened. Yes, he said after a pause. We've spoken privately. And your response to his activation of Section 4? Creighton straightened. The clause exists to ensure accountability. We respect its use. But the cameras caught it. The flicker in his expression, the strain in his voice. This wasn't just damage control. It was personal. Backstage, an aide leaned into Creighton's ear. Legal wants you to stop talking. He ignored them. Let me be clear, Creighton said, now addressing the room directly. No individual, regardless of their status or history, will dictate Falcon's operations without a full and fair review. It sounded strong. But for those who knew better, for those watching closely, it sounded like an old grudge reawakening. A fight between two titans. And this time, the world was watching. The next morning, a quiet press release appeared on Johnson & Grant Aerospace's website. Effective immediately, all collaborative contracts with Falcon Airlines are suspended pending a full audit of internal practices and personnel accountability. No comment, no press conference, just 12 words, and the sound of an industry shaking. Falcon's stock dropped 11% within hours. Analysts scrambled. Board members panicked. Private calls were made. Urgent, desperate calls. Not to PR strategists, but to Alexander Grant himself. He declined every single one, but that didn't stop the offers. By midday, Falcon's legal team sent over a settlement proposal, a private apology, full refund of all ticket costs, and a generous donation to a children's charity of the Grant's choosing. A blank check, essentially, in exchange for silence. Alexander didn't even open the envelope. He handed it to Ava and Noel instead. This is for you to decide, he said, setting it on the table between them. The girls stared at the thick manila folder, the corporate logo embossed in silver on the corner. What does it mean? Noel asked. It means, Alexander said, that they'd rather pay to bury their shame than change what caused it. Ava's brow furrowed. How much is in there? Enough to make most problems disappear, he said softly. The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Noel pushed the envelope back toward him. We don't want it. Alexander raised an eyebrow. You sure? Ava nodded. If we take their money, they'll just do it to someone else next time. And next time, it might be a kid without a dad like you. Alexander felt something catch in his chest. They don't need to give us money, Ava added. They need to give other kids safety. He looked at them, truly looked at them. His daughters, just 10 years old, seated in matching hoodies with juice boxes half finished on the table, speaking like stateswomen. He'd spent his life teaching others to wield power with grace. Now, it was his daughters who were teaching him. Later that evening, a new letter was drafted, this time by Ava and Noel themselves. To Falcon Airlines, we are not accepting your offer. We don't want compensation. We want protection. For every child who flies alone, who looks different, who is judged before they speak. We want your policies to change. We want your people trained. We want our dignity back, and we want to make sure the next kid doesn't lose theirs. You can't buy silence. Not this time. Sincerely, Ava and Noel Grant. The letter went viral within hours. News anchors read it live on air. Teachers printed it for classroom discussions. Civil rights organizations framed it as a declaration of the next generation's courage. And across every social feed, one line echoed louder than the rest. We don't want money, we want change. 6 months later, the sky looked different. At a grand auditorium inside the Capitol, banners lined the walls reading, National Aviation Ethics Summit, Unity Above the Clouds. CEOs, regulators, lawmakers, civil rights leaders, they were all there. But the spotlight didn't fall on the usual suits and slogans. It fell on two 10-year-old girls. Ava and Noel stood side by side at the podium, dressed in simple navy blazers, each with a tiny silver pin shaped like a paper airplane. The room hushed as Ava stepped forward first, her voice small but unwavering. "We were just trying to go see our grandma," she began. "We weren't trying to start anything big. We just wanted to sit where we were supposed to." Noel took over, her tone steady. "But when people don't believe you belong, they try to make you disappear. They make you feel small, like maybe you did something wrong, just by being there." The room was silent. And then Ava said the words that had shaken the internet months before. "We don't want money. We want change." Applause rose like thunder. Not the polite kind, but the kind that shakes something loose in your chest. The summit concluded with an unprecedented agreement. Every major U.S. airline signed a binding aviation ethics charter. It included mandatory anti-bias training, transparency in complaint processes, a passenger dignity clause, and protections for unaccompanied minors, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds. But that wasn't the only legacy left in the wake of Flight 227. 1 week after the summit, Johnson and Grant Aerospace made a second announcement. Alexander Grant was retiring. The news made waves across every sector. Analysts speculated, journalists speculated louder. Who would replace him? Another Harvard-bred executive? A board favorite? No. Her name was Monica Ellis, and she didn't come from Wall Street. She came from the aisle of an aircraft. 6 years earlier, Monica had been a senior flight attendant at a regional carrier, until she was terminated for defending a Muslim family being harassed mid-flight. She had no legal team, no cameras, no powerful father behind her. She just had integrity. Alexander had followed her story, quietly, respectfully. 2 years later, he hired her to lead his internal training program on passenger rights and empathy. She rebuilt it from scratch. Now, he handed her the keys. At the handover ceremony, Alexander gave no speech about legacy or leadership. Instead, he said only this: power belongs to those who remember what it's like not to have it. Then he turned to Ava and Noel, who stood in the front row, and smiled. As Monica Ellis approached the microphone for her first address as CEO, the cameras flashed. Some reporters whispered about her lack of Ivy League credentials. Others said nothing at all. But millions watching at home, young, old, black, brown, unheard, unseen, sat a little taller in their chairs. Because somewhere above them, the rules had changed, and this time they belonged in the sky too.